Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report, Tuesday's edition, and we're broadcasting bi-coastal from Southern California and the great Commonwealth of Virginia. Dave Bratt, welcome back to the show. Happy to have you with me today.
Hey, great to be on, Mark. I love your show. Thank you.
Hey, listen, I love everything you're doing at Liberty University, but Dave, for our viewers and listeners out here, Economics 101. I know you're the dean of the business department. Can we literally, I know there's not too many Democrats that watch us, but for all of our Republican and our independent viewers and the handful of Democrats that may watch us, can we talk Economics 101 here? I mean, Dave, you don't tax something if you want more of it. Help me out with what the Democrats are trying to do right now.
No, well, they obviously don't care about economics, and their language reflects that. And I don't mean to be overly cynical or partisan, but they don't care about economics, or efficiency, or the price system, or equilibrium in markets, or even GDP growth. They care about supposedly equity and accumulating power so they can enforce their worldview on everyone. So they're not the old liberals, right? They're not the libertarian liberal types that respected, John Stuart Mill and, liberty for everybody. You live your life and I'll live my life. They are using the entire economy. 1/5 of the economy is healthcare. They control it. Now energy's going to 10 or 20% of the economy. They control it. The federal government, several trillion a year, they control it. The education system is public. They control it, right? So that you're starting to get a sense. And if you're not exactly happy with your life, which most people are not right now, you may want to take a moment, go to a yoga class and reflect for a minute on the meaning of life, right? And say, do I like the way we're going here? Because I don't like it. And so it's not about economics at all. I wish anyone cared about economics. If you want to teach your kids economics, just go YouTube Uncle Milton Friedman. He's the best of the best. And you'll learn economics back from the 60s and 70s before the politics went crazy.
Manchin was given a lot of accolades by people on the right and in the center for opposing the Build Back Better, and rightfully so. That thing was a monstrosity. It likely didn't have Manchin's or Sinema's support. Now he's come to embrace, this piece of legislation, we'll call it. Dave, you and I have been around a long time. Have you ever seen a bill misnamed as badly as this one is? I mean, they're calling this thing the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, I know Sinema's not on board yet, and I know the parliamentarian hasn't finished the review yet. So, I mean, my gut feeling tells me Sinema's not going to play her cards until she sees what the parliamentarian rules. But have you ever seen a name more backwards than what's in this bill?
No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, just up is down and down is up. And this thing's inflationary, right? We got 9% inflation. Everybody knows if you print more money and spend more money from the government, that puts upward pressure on prices. It's more stuff demanding more stuff. And by the way, that's the simple problem right now. The left and even the Republicans, I hate to say it, but the Republican leadership don't appear to be much different. They always focus on the demand side of the economy. Mm-hmm. No one is focusing on the supply side, right? Where taxes do matter. Yep. And when you tax the small business and regulate them beyond comprehension, they're failing. There's some new surveys out that say a third to a half of small businesses might not be able to pay their rent at the end of the month. Yep. Right now, right? The bigs, if you're out for power, you would love to have very concentrated power in the hands of a few giant firms which you control, like all of big tech, right? The big 5 tech firms are worth more than all of Europe combined. And the government's got their thumb on them. They don't really need to have the thumb because they're mainly lefties anyway. But it's just incredible how we don't focus on capital investment. And then the other major part of the supply side is education. We don't care about poor kids in inner cities and giving them education and skills, right? We're jamming ideology at them right now, not skills. We're not teaching them IT and any of this stuff. Yeah. And then finally, you got to have technological growth. That's the only variable that causes long-run growth in the Solo model, Nobel Prize in economics. Not that anyone would know any of this. But if you don't have technological growth, then you can go look at Northwestern University Robert Gordon. He's the best guy in the world on technological growth. And total factor productivity right now is at zero. And it has been. It's been down since 1960. Just a straight downward decline, total factor productivity, zero. So the real economy is a carcass just laying there. And what do you do with the carcass if you got to get elected? You pump stimulus into it, right? You pump some blood through it, you print some money, you spend some government, and the carcass just gets deader and deader and deader. And so that's unfortunately where we are. We got 20 years of rebuilding to do.
Yeah, I concur with you. You've used that term carcass coming on the show many times. I mean, and I think you're right about that. I mean, here's the interesting thing. I was doing some reading through the bill, and I came across the Nonpartisan Joint Committee on Taxation. That sounds like a lot of words, but supposedly it's a legitimate nonpartisan, meaning no Republican, Democrat group, that really looked into the bill. And Dave, they had the following revelations. They said there's about $16 billion in taxes in this bill for people making less than $200,000.
Right.
Now, again, 100 to 200,000 used to be considered pretty good income, okay, and it still is in a great part of the country. But that breaks Biden's promise not to tax people under 400 grand, which he ran in the campaign. Another 16, 18 billion dollars is taxing people earning 200 to 400,000. So, I mean, to me, I've never heard, even Barack Obama did not advocate raising taxes when you may be in an economic recession, which that could be debated right now. But Dave, I've never, to raise taxes and then spend additional money. I never buy the basic premise that Manchin and Schumer are trying to sell, saying, well, we're going to raise $750 and we're going to spend $450. You were in Congress. Did you ever have a bill come across that actually passed where we brought in more revenue than spending?
No.
I didn't think so.
It always sounds appealing. That's why the Democrats are like Santa Claus a lot of times, right? It's a great story to have on your side. But unfortunately, all the evidence goes against that. And the real crime here is that, it's $500 billion. So, just skip the whole revenues and taxes and all that. At a critical juncture in our economy, when we could go off the rails, right? That $500 billion could be placed strategically to really jumpstart the economy in a real way. Right. If you're going to do government spending, which I don't really want to do. But they could place it there, right? And we've got some shocking stats coming at us, right? The Rand Corporation did a study a few weeks ago. It was in Bloomberg magazine, showed that if China attacks Taiwan, there's a 5 to 10% GDP hit to the United States.
Yeah.
A few percentage GDP hit back in 07, 08 brought the stock market to its knees, 50% off. Can you imagine a 5 to 10% GDP hit? And that's just assuming a one-year war. And then the impact on China was 30% GDP hit to China because they're totally connected and they rely on the rest of the world and supply chains and everything for their existence. And so, I mean, there's serious stuff that if you got 500 billion, you aim it at, protecting yourself against that downside, but we're not intelligent enough to do it.
Yeah, and I think the Rand Corporation is actually conservative in their estimates.
I think so. Yeah,
I mean, we don't want to get into the stuff with Pelosi. She's hogging every headline across the globe today. But and again, I'm not going to comment one way or another about whether she's right or wrong to be there.
Yeah.
I mean, she made a decision. She went against the president. She's there. The Chinese are going to yell and scream. Do I think China is going to risk their economic recovery on invading Taiwan? My gut feeling tells me no, but again, I'm not sitting here in China calling the shots. But I think, Dave, if they did something with Taiwan, think about all the businesses. Apple Computer, top of the list, with a $2.7 trillion market capitalization. I mean, they manufacture everything in China. All the other high-tech companies that are in China, the semiconductor company. I mean, you're talking about this would make the Ukraine-Russia situation look like a walk in the park, in my opinion. I just think that's
the only mistake you're making is you're being rational. And so the Chinese do have to achieve that objective by 2049. That's their 100-year anniversary. Mm-hmm. And they have to achieve that in order to achieve regional hemispheric harmony. because we all know the Chinese, the CCP, the Communist Party. The one thing when you look at them, you think, boy, they have a harmonious life. It's full of harmony. If you can't hear the sarcasm, I'm dripping right now.
Yeah, I know, we got it.
Harmony, right? So that's got to happen. And there's articles out. They've done research that Tiananmen, it took 15 years for the memories to go bye-bye.
Yep.
So if you take 2050 less 15 years for the memories to go bye-bye, you're at 2035. So yeah, they may not do it now, but they don't care if they lose 100 million people. There's evidence of this from Mao all the way on, right? So we think there's no way. That's the most irrational calculation. But they don't view it that way. That's real estate. That's terra firma. That's part of China, and it's going to happen. And it's going to happen, but no one knows when.
Right. Understood. Well, let's talk about China just a minute, Dave, because part of the reason we've seen oil prices moderate from $100, $120 a barrel down into the mid-90s is because demand in China slowed. That with like zero COVID policy, and folks, you saw some bad policies here in this country. Zero COVID, that's just insane. I mean, it's not going to work. And yet, the Chinese Communist Party, they shut down entire cities, entire businesses, and demand did slow for oil as a result of that. People think, well, Biden I heard some Democrats saying, well, Biden's release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, that's what brought it down. I said, no, that may have contributed a tiny amount, but slowing growth in China is what did it. And the other thing, Dave, we've talked about this. China built all this real estate, and in my opinion, some of that real estate is, I call it built on quicksand, empty buildings, banks financed it. There's a lot of hesitancy in China now related to that. You even had some, not very well reported, but there were some bank runs that took place in China.
That's right.
And I'm sitting there saying, on the one hand, okay, they're not going to do anything stupid right now. But on the other hand, if you want to divert from economic problems at home, when's a better time to change the subject? So, these risk factors are out there. And Dave, I just sense, gasoline prices have fallen roughly, not a straight line, but they've been down about 45 days. So that's helped take some pressure off.
Yeah.
But I'm not seeing any pressure taken off on wages. I talk to employers all the time, and they're saying, hey, my wage costs are going up to offset what I'm saving in gas. So how do you square that one, Dave? I'm not quite, tying the knots together there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, on that China thing, I think that zero COVID story hinges on Xi Jinping's election this year, right? So he did a back of the envelope calculation. Is it better to have COVID wipe out and kill tons of people and take a big risk story versus just being a normal tyrant, locking everybody up for a month at a time in your apartment? And he just did the math. And so, so they're and I don't trust any of that data, right? They're saying they're at about 0% growth right now, or maybe shrinking 0.5%. There's no way that's true. And they say their PMI, the manufacturing index, just dipped below 50. There's no way that's true. It's got to be down at 30.
Yeah.
I don't believe any of that. And you pointed out, rightly so, hardly anybody points that out, but they've had run on the banks. The real estate sector, I think, is about 30% of their GDP. It's about 70% of the average Chinese individual asset holdings.
Mm-hmm.
They hold it as a sign of personal wealth. It's how men look attractive culturally, and they don't have capital markets and equity markets like we have. So they hold it all there, and then they build the buildings. You're paying for the building while they build it, and then lo and behold, they don't build the building because they took all your money and they invested in some real estate down the way for them to do something else. And now that Ponzi scheme's coming to an end. It's just the exact same as 07, 08 here, right? With a real estate Ponzi scheme. And so we'll see how significant that is. But that China is the major news story of our day, and everyone's paying attention to Ukraine and all this nonsense. And we're going to pay. We're going to pay for that long term in a big way.
Dave, before I get into the debate on recession, no recession, the Senate passed the CHIPS Act last week. Now it's over in the House.
Yeah.
I know the intent is to help subsidize semiconductor companies to build plants here. It seems like a noble goal, okay? 17 Republicans in the Senate supported it. There appears to be a certain number of Republicans in the House that will support it. What say you relative to that CHIPS bill? Is it more boondoggle, or is there some good stuff in there? And how would you handicap that one?
Yeah, you first of all ask, about the bottom line with respect to chips. Okay, so if you need a chips bill, chips must be a problem. Well, as we said earlier, we still have our allies sending chips to China,
Right.
and Taiwan's a major issue, and Biden's got significant compromises that are coming out now, even on CNN, with respect to China and chips and all this stuff. And so, do I buy it? No. It's just politicians putting up it's just a way for them to hide from the inevitable bad news. And I say, I did something about that, right? So, yeah, okay. So you don't need to subsidize anything, right? If the price of chips goes up due to scarcity, that's supposed to attract supply in free market economics, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is we don't have a working market. All of this is regulated. You got all sorts of monopoly power in those high-tech sectors. We haven't graduated kids in science and engineering and all the degrees where we have an abundance of people in that industry. And so it's just a mirage. Should you try to subsidize chips right now in the short run when we could get wiped out? Yes.
Yeah.
But the overall story, I don't buy it for a minute.
I viewed it as sort of all the bills the Democrats have passed, I viewed this as the least bad one. Right. I can make an argument. I learned you can make an argument for parts of the bill. So I don't know. I was sort of neutral on this. I'm not mad at the 17 Republicans that voted for it. I'm equally not disappointed at those that didn't. So I don't know. I was just interested in your thoughts on it. But let me tell you one thing happening today. And the big debate last week, Dave, and I really want your opinion on this. Are we in a recession? Are we not? Oh yeah. We met the classic definition: 2 straight negative quarters. Okay, I'm looking at the markets today, and I'm seeing the yield on the 2-year note. Folks, that short-term paper, it's 30 basis points higher than a 10-year note. Dave, most economic books I've studied, when the 2-year is 30 basis points higher than the 10-year, that means I'm either in a recession or down the road we're likely to be in one. Do you have an opinion on this, where we are right now? I mean, I know about all the money printing. What do you think?
It's just the left gets us into these Orwellian conversations. Right. I mean, it's just amazing you got to even have it. Total factor productivity is terrible. You got 10% inflation. If you put $100 in the bank, in a bunch of years, it's worth zero at 10% a year. You're right. It compounds on the downside too. You're getting hammered. We're in a recession, right? And you got 2 quarters of GDP going down on top of it all, and the PMI's down, and you got global recession in the works across every country you can name. China's in the weeds. You don't think that's going to affect, right? So it's just nonsense. We're in a recession, but they just have power over language. I mean, the masks work, and then the masks don't work, and now they work again, and then the vaccine will keep you from getting infected. Whoops, no, it doesn't keep you from getting infected. Well, it does, and then now you can get it and then have a dip for a week and get it and not get it. I mean, it's just, right? I mean, everybody knows the federal government stories don't make any sense.
Well,
and then that vaccine story, right? Everyone needs to read the real Anthony Fauci, just the last 5 chapters 9 on. And you asked about the CHIPS bill. I mean, you wait till you see, this is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s book, right? So this is bipartisan, right? Yeah. And he's not especially friendly with the CIA for obvious family reasons. And you go read, it's a devastating read on the Rockefeller Foundation, the Gates Foundation, and the vaccine research project, which has been around for 50 years. This isn't some new thing. Right. And the same names, and they go in with benevolent things to Africa and they wipe out people. And then the money-making apparatus comes behind the nonprofits that they set up, and it's right. So on the CHIPS bill, right now they're selling like, oh, it's common sense, you got to do it. Wait to see the names and the money and the donors attached, which we'll find out in 5 years, and everyone will say, I can't believe they did that to us again. Right? I am shocked.
Yeah, it does seem rinse, repeat. Right. Hey, listen, I think you're right about that. I mean, a lot of indications are that we're either in it or very, very close to it. But I noticed last week when Jerome Powell spoke, and he seemed to indicate that we may not be raising interest rates as fast. And I'm sitting here thinking, oh, that's a signal to Wall Street, buy, 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 which they've
Right.
done.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here saying, wait a minute, I was following what Federal Reserve officials were saying the last 2 days. I'm not hearing stop, stop, stop. I'm hearing, okay, in the next meeting we need to raise 50 basis points and then we'll go from there. Dave, am I missing something here? But let's say inflation was 9.1. Okay, because of oil prices coming down, maybe it dips down into the 8s, or maybe we're lucky upper 7s. But if we got a Fed funds rate around 2.3 and inflation's even running at 7, that's not equilibrium. I mean, when Volcker killed inflation, he took the Fed funds rate above the inflation rate. What is Jerome Powell signaling here?
Oh, that's right. And everybody ought to go out, like you just said, review the Taylor rule, right? If you would have followed the Taylor rule 10 years ago, you can't hold the federal funds rate at 0,
right?
Which put us into this soup. And so, no, Powell's trying to be earnest and saying what he's saying, but the markets know, right? There's this thing called the Greenspan put. Whenever it really gets down to it, the Fed's going to bail out Wall Street and ruin the middle class like they always do every decade. We should have learned after 07, 08, and then we don't. Then you get another 10 years zero interest rate, which props up equities and stocks and every asset under the sun and kills grandma and grandpa's savings account. And the middle class gets doused. And then we paid to bail out all the big banks in 07, 08. No one went to jail. And now we got the bubble popping again. And so what Wall Street knows, to answer your question, is that, they're going to raise rates for 3 to 6 months, probably a half and half or whatever it is, and act like they're trying to put the horse back in the barn, right? This the phrase for inflation. But then everybody knows that the Fed's going to wimp out in about 6 months, and it's already priced back in the market.
Yeah, not only price.
And all of us that are in mutual funds, we're just, don't open it, don't look, right? But the rich, they're like, buy, sell, right? Buy. And they're making chunks of money off this. They know what's coming. They know how to, if you can do that, right, and day trade big, the big boys are making money off all this chaos, and the middle class is getting soaked.
I speak to some of the traders on Wall Street. I did earlier today, and there's a belief actually, I said, I think you guys are wrong. I was talking to a trading desk. They actually believe in Q2 of 2023, the Fed will start lowering interest rates. And I'm like, there is no possibility that's going to happen. They go, well, look at your history. And
that's what they think.
Right? They actually do. And you know what? I could be wrong. I could be wrong about this, but I think it's going to take a little bit longer than that to bring this inflation number down.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah,
right.
I think I
You're
am.
right. You're right. But they may just wimp out anyway because of the election cycle.
Yeah, that's
they know it. And to crush inflation, you have to do way more in terms of cooling the economy down. But they got other motives other than the welfare of the human life form.
Well, I want to tie in two things you just talked about. You said 2007 to 2009. Oh, by the way, okay, Dave, last month, and I have some friends that tried to sell houses, it didn't work out so good for them. Housing really fell last month. Okay, in the month of July, it clearly peaked earlier in the year, June-ish, maybe end of May. You had the biggest drop since 07, 08. I mean, Dave, if this housing thing, which is clearly slowing down, because it was a bubble, this was a bubble that was greater than the bubble prior to 07, 08. I mean, the days of 100 people lining up to buy an over the ass price, those days are gone. And it happened like that. So now you have a situation where I think there's going to be some pain in the real estate market, because some of these people that bought this year top ticked the market, leveraged themselves up. The only thing that's perplexing to me about it, while the Fed has raised rates, the mortgage rates peaked around 6, now they're trading around 5. 5 is still a low number for all our audience that don't get used to like 2 and 3% loans. I mean, I've lived through the day where you have been happy to get 10%. But anyhow, Dave, 5's not an exorbitant number, but this bubble looks like it's good. You know how you go up the left side of the mountain, everybody, oh, great, now we're on the right side of the mountain. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And it goes beyond that. The Case-Shiller Index, Shiller, I think he won a Nobel Prize. He's out of Yale. And he had a paper back in the 07, 08 thing, the the housing cycle is the business cycle, I think was the name of it, or something like that, or the housing cycle leads the business cycle. But it's a huge asset, and a bunch of other consumer products go along with that purchase of a home. And so, yeah, if the housing market craters, hold on to your helmets. But yeah, that's going to collapse. I think that's a given. And then there's going to be way more pain than that. We haven't seen the real crash here yet.
Oh,
right?
it's
Within
just
the next
starting.
few, yeah, right. These guys are doing what you said, right? They're buying the dips and they're playing little fun games up on the rich class in Greenwich or whoever.
Yeah.
And so we'll see. And then it's what I don't think they see is that the American people are realigning politically, and it's not Republican Democrat, it's populist centrist, right? There's a huge new move, right? There's huge moves in Virginia. The past governor's race, over half the Hispanics voted for a Republican governor.
Oh yeah.
And it didn't have to do with the governor in particular. I think it just had to do with the recognition that the elites are out of control right now.
Yeah.
And so there's a massive political realignment, and we'll see how that turns out. But
I'm glad you brought that up, because the Hispanic movement, the Democratic Party literally is in a panic, because the Hispanics are moving to the GOP. Why? Because people shouldn't treat groups as monolithic groups. I mean, Hispanic voters want the same thing, whether you're white, black, Asian, Hispanic. They want to have stable prices. They want to live in the safety of their home. They don't want crime just enveloping them. They want a secure border. You look at the polling, Dave, 75% of Hispanic voters, they want a secure border. And I think the Democratic Party just grossly misread the tea leaves here. I think they're going to pay the price. And if Myra Flores was the example, you and I actually talked about this 4 or 5 shows ago when we were talking about elections. Those blue counties along that Rio Grande, how do you elect a Republican? Because she had better policies. So I sense that that's going to happen. Look, Americans are concerned right now. I mean, average rent in this country is up to $2,000 a month. I mean,
it's amazing.
Yeah, and 35% of the public, they rent. I thought the actual number was higher.
You're wrong about one thing you said.
Okay.
You said we all want the same thing. There's a group of 10% of the people, the white Marxist, Ivy League educated elitists. Yeah. They want to be miserable, have psychic pain, less economic growth. They want to live out the Marxist ideal.
Yeah.
And they want you to be miserable. Yeah. But for some reason, they're in incredible leadership positions across universities and the administrative state, et cetera. And they're wreaking havoc on this guy. And they're not liberals, right? These are leftist Louis.
Yeah.
And you're right. They've acted like they've been acting in the best interest of other people, and they want to make you miserable. So that's the piece that's changing. Everyone's catching on.
And I'll second what you just said there. Unfortunately, a lot of those leftists are in what I call seats of power. They're staffers in the Biden White House. They're staffers on Congress. They're academics. They're making recommendations to the president.
Yep.
And thank goodness Glenn Youngkin won in Virginia. And I think what happened in Virginia is going to be happening all across the country. I think our side, I think Republicans finally realized we can't take this anymore. We have to fight back. And thank goodness we're seeing evidence of that all across the country, from things that Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida on the education front, to what Greg Abbott's trying to do in Texas, and what Glenn Youngkin did in Virginia. I mean, I noticed, Dave, in your state, you got like a $2 billion surplus now in the state?
Yeah, things are moving much better. And but don't get too excited, because the Republican leadership can steal defeat out of the jaws of victory.
I know.
Within minutes. They do not have a plan on paper to do anything, right? And so all of this idea of progress is contingent on one thing. And can you downsize the federal government? Can you get the Fed government out of our lives? State government, fine. Local government, you want to plant a lot of flowers in your neighborhood? You want to do this, that, and the other thing? Green, I love it. Yeah. Let's do it, right? I'll help you plant your flower garden.
Yeah.
But at the federal level, no, because there's just all sorts of mischief. And everyone, I hope, has learned, except the Republican Party tentacles to the donor class. It's so comfortable, right? To just, if we lose them, what are we going to do? Rely on the people to vote? Are we going to rely on the people to do the right thing? No, we got to have these, donor class ourselves that cause us to do everything terrible. And so we'll see if we get a backbone.
Yeah, my sense is, look, a lot of people are saying, you and I have talked about the misery index. I said on yesterday's show, a lot of people are saying, well, based on the misery index, Republicans should win 30 to 40 seats. I'm like, wait a minute here. With all the big tech money, with all the billionaires that support Democrats, the media, the institutions, it's not as easy. I said yesterday on yesterday's show, I said, look, I'll be happy with a 10 to 20 seat win. I mean, to me, anything above that is icing on the cake because of just the gerrymandering and how the districts and
it's rough.
Yeah. I mean, if we hit that, that's great. And if we can hit that and somehow eke out a win, one or two in the Senate, then that's nirvana for me. I mean, over the next couple of years. But, it's 90-something days to go until the election we get there. Dave, let me ask you this, a couple other things economically. You're at Liberty University, okay?
Yep.
You got great students. You've talked about it on the show many times. Now, what's the feeling both among your students and the administration and yourself? Biden, well, first under Trump, they halted the payments on student loans. Then they said, well, we're not even going to accrue the interest anymore. We've had like a $300 billion swing. In other words, the government thought they were going to make over $100 billion on student loan program prior to the pandemic. Now they're forecasting a $200 billion loss. I mean, that sort of dwarfs the size of the CHIPS bill 6 times over. And Dave, it doesn't get a whole lot of mention. And Biden is still thinking about trying to reduce $10,000 on each student's bill. We got a $1.7 trillion issue out there.
Yeah.
What are your students' thoughts? What are your thoughts? And how?
Our students are not typical. They are educated kind of like Harvard was founded back in 1640. Truth for Christ and Church was Harvard's motto. In 1640, John Harvard was educated at Cambridge and was a pastor. And all that's fallen apart, right? So our kids don't have this entitlement mentality for any of this. If you borrow, you're borrowing and you owe a debt, and it's the Judeo-Christian ethos, et cetera. And by the way, if there's any CEOs or C-suite folks out on the West Coast and you want to take a look at Liberty, come out October 5, 6, and 7. You can email me at dabrat@Liberty, dabrat@liberty.edu. And we're having a 500 CEO summit. We're have a special outreach to help drive capital and business to Africa through that our CEOs. We got Newt Gingrich coming in as our keynote on Thursday, and the presidents of a couple, Sierra Leone, Ghana, et cetera, are coming in. Our lieutenant governor and 500 CEOs, former Secretary of Defense, former Secretary of the Navy, former Trump head of cyber, former NSC, just for the first panel. Right, Kingdom advisors, Christian financial advisors on the second panel, clerks to all the Supreme Court guys on the third panel. It's just superstars. So if you ever wanted to take a peek at Liberty, that's the time. Come on out, worship with our kids. 10,000 kids worshiping at a time. You'll be stunned at that worship service, and you'll see what our kids are like.
Well,
they just they don't have any of the entitlement attitude at all toward. If you take out a loan, you took out a loan, and you owe it back.
Yeah. Well, I sort of knew the answer to that question before I asked you, because you've talked about the quality of your students before. And, again, for everybody listening and viewing our show, you had an outstanding conference last year at the same time. I mean, I remember when you put it on, and it worked out fantastic. So I'm going to try to get my schedule to the East Coast around that time. I'll brief you, and we'll talk about it a little bit, future day. Dave, I mean, I really want to see it because the first
and one of our friends, by the way, that will be there is Steve Green, head of Hobby Lobby, president, and he's CEO of the Bible Museum up in D.C. So take your kids up to the Bible Museum, take a train down here to Liberty. It's only 3.5 hours from D.C. by Amtrak. It costs you $30 each way. Not bad.
Yeah,
better than gas.
That's a great event. It's great that Liberty's hosting. It's just outstanding stuff. Dave, we just got a couple minutes left. Okay, I want to ask you one other economic thing here. New report came out just this morning. Job openings. Okay, was 11.1 million last month, fell to 10.7. Dave, that seems to me like that's a good thing. Because we've only got like 5 million workers now to fill 10 million jobs. It used to be to fill 11. How do we bridge that gap? I mean, how does it tighten up? Because we're sitting at a big number, right? I mean, still, that's a lot of job openings, 10.7, and only 5 million people to fill them. How do we?
I'm not sure what to make of this labor market data yet. I think something's off with it. And the reason I say that is because all these labor market reports that are being touted on one side are very good news, but then you got a GDP drop for 2 quarters in a row.
Right.
So how in the world do you have output going down when you got labor going up? In economics, that means you have a decrease in productivity.
Right.
Well, that's true, but I don't think it's of that degree of magnitude, right? That output's dropping while you're adding a ton of workers. I think it probably has to do with the reaction of coming out of COVID. And then when you calculate the unemployment rate and some of these figures, a lot of people are just giving up and quit. So they're not counted anymore. And there's a few other, I just don't know what to think. And then you got a wide open southern border.
Yeah.
And I don't know who's counting who. And so I just don't buy it. I'd much rather focus on the one that matters, and that's output.
Yeah.
How much stuff are you making? And you can't fool around with that as much.
Is any chance, well, there's always a chance, but do you think Powell is skilled enough to be able to orchestrate this, quote, soft landing? I mean, I knew you were going to laugh at that. I knew before I asked the question. I said, what? Come on, Mark, don't ask him this. I know the
Here's the real estate market in 07. Housing prices up. Is my hand off the chart yet?
Yeah, it's off the chart.
Yeah. And then they asked Bernanke, how is the housing market? It's great. The next, month, right? The account, right? So that's how I feel, right? So, no. And then Greenspan's nickname was called the Maestro, right?
Right.
Get out your little Mozart here with the music. The Maestro. And the Maestro printed all the money before 04, 05. He printed too much money to create 07, 08.
Yeah.
And so, no, I got no faith in these guys until they follow the Taylor rule. They all ought to be fired until they follow the Taylor rule.
Yeah.
We need a rule, not discretion.
It's John Taylor from Stanford University. And explain the Taylor rule, in less than a minute, Dave.
Yeah, well, it's just he fine-tuned Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman said if the GDP's growing by 3%, well, you got more stuff, so you need 3% more money to grease the wheels for the 3% more stuff, right? So if you ought to print roughly M2, the money supply ought to go up by 3% if GDP, your output's going up by 3%. And then Taylor fine-tuned that formula a little bit, but it's basically the same thing. And if you go out and look at the equation of exchange, right, it's MV equals PQ. Well, it's M on the one side and P on the other. And the other two, there's not that much movement. So M totally determines P. So if you increase M, guess what's going to happen? P goes up.
Right.
And go out to M2 for the audience on FRED, that's the Federal Reserve database. And M2 is just off the chart.
Yeah.
And so there's no shocker that prices are going up off the chart.
Yeah. I find it hard to believe that if the Fed follows through in September, reducing their balance sheet $95 billion a month, folks, that balance sheet's $9 trillion. You want to know where all the money came from? When we started COVID, that balance sheet was 3. They've increased it $6 trillion.
Yeah.
And you telling me they're going to run it off at $95 billion a month while raising interest rates, and we're going to have a soft landing? I'm not buying what's being sold there. I'm in your camp on that, Dave, Brad.
And they have a misleading graph also with the rate of money growth coming down, right? And it looks like you get the impression, M2's coming down and it must be slowing or what. But at the end of it in 22, it's still at 12% growth.
Yeah.
So they were increasing it at 24%. Now it's only growing at 12%. What I just say it should be growing at, the GDP growth rate, which is 0.
Right. Yeah.
So it's still inflationary and expansionary, right? And so, you're right. There's no way.
What do they say in Washington, Dave? When you were in Congress, they said, well, no, we're cutting the budget. No, we're not cutting it. We're reducing the rate of the increase.
Increase.
Only in Washington, D.C., they're reducing the rate of the increase in the budget. Can that be considered a budget cut? I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh talk about that, and the guy would he'd put me in stitches talking about that. and nothing's changed other than we wish the great one was still with us. All right.
Got it.
All right, Dave, final thing here, 30 seconds. What's going to happen between now and the elections? I mean, good for Republicans, Democrats? Put your crystal ball on, tell me what you see.
Yeah, I don't say it to be a doomsayer, but we got all bad coming at us. All the easy moves have been made. Now we got stagflation. No matter what you do, you're either going to trigger inflation or recession. And so all the policy moves there. National defense, we've hollowed out the defense psychologically, especially. And we got some hard moves there and no backbone or discipline. So, no, I see steady decline until someone comes in with a different political philosophy.
Well, that decline, I'll agree with you there. And if that decline continues, or if gas prices rebound, you're going to see a new Republican House. Dave, you're becoming an international celebrity. You've done One American Network, Steve Bannon, and Schaftlein Report. Thank goodness for the Dave Bratts of the world spreading the word. Folks, can't thank Dave enough for coming on today. Great guy, and his opinions, I know you guys always appreciate him. Dave, thanks for coming on again. I always enjoyed doing the show with you.
Thanks, Mark. God bless everyone out there. Get out to Liberty, October 5, 6, 7. Worth your while.
October 5th, 6, and 7.
Yep, bring your young scholars with you.
Great.
And give us a look. I got an open door policy, 3rd floor business school.
Dave, thanks again. Stay safe out there. Keep preaching the message, my man.
Will do. All right, brother. Thanks, Mark.
See you soon. Folks, that's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow, and always, we're going to cut through the propaganda. We'll tell you what's really going on. Stay safe. See you on Wednesday.